Now what we're going to do is we're going to, lesson 2, we're jumping into, told you, it's a fast lesson, or a fast booklet. Lesson 2 is square root of a function. This one here, what kind of function are we going to use? It says you're given the graph of y equals to f of x, where f of x is a linear function. Sketch the graph of y equals the square root of f of x. And then state the domain and the range. So this is now the graph. We don't have an equation for that, but we could figure it out if we wanted to, because that's pretty simple, right? What's the equation of this line? What do you think the equation of the line is? It's a linear equation, yeah? So what's the specific equation? Two x plus 4. Okay, so 2x plus 4. How did we figure that out again? Okay, so this one here in a slope-intercept form. What is the slope of the graph? It's rise over run, right? So you go from one point to the next point, you go up to right 1. So 2, the slope is positive 2, and then the y-intercept is 4. Okay, so that's the equation of the line. But really, we don't really need to figure out the equation of the line to graph the square root of the function. Okay, so what can we do? What can we do? We said that because this values will give us negative value, right? Negative, so it's not defined in here. So we cross that off. That's not part of our radical function. And then here, this is our first point. Square root of 0. If x is negative 2, okay, y is 0. And then when we take the square root of 0, it's 0. Okay? Okay, so everything in here are negative, right? So if we start at negative 2, if x is negative 2, what is the f of x? Is 0. And then what's the square root of 0 is 0. Okay. What about negative 1? If x is negative 1, if x is negative 1, f of x is 2. Right? So that's a point on the line, right? Negative 1, 2. Yes? Is everybody okay? Yeah? Now, what's the square root of f of x? It's going to be square root of 2, which is 1 point. Here's my calculator. Square root of 2 is 1.414. Okay. What other points do you see on the straight line? If x is 0, y is 4. And then f of x is 4. What's the square root of f of x? 2. What else do you know? It's 1. If x is 1, what is the y? 6. And what's the square root of that? So square root of 6 would be 2.44945. Okay. So what's the new function? What's the new graph? It's a new graph. Okay. What we're going to do is we're going to take the x and the square root of f of x, which is, we're going to take these two. Okay, so let's do that. So the first point is -2, 0, so that's this one. -1 is going to give us 1.414. So -1 is 1.414. Around there. And 0 is going to give us a 2. And then 1 will give us a 2.45. 2.45. Okay. So the graph is going to be something like this. Now, where there has to be that bubble thing, right? So where is the bubble? It's going to be like this. Between these are your invariant points. Invariant points meaning it doesn't change. So it doesn't change here and it doesn't change at 1. So it bubbles up a bit and then goes that way. Okay, so this is that little bubble that we were talking about earlier. So from there, we have the graph of y equals the square root of f of x. Okay, is that good? Is everybody okay? Now, this is our first example. So we'll take a look at the next one. Let's first take a look at the domain. Okay. State the domain and range of y equals to the square root of f of x. Okay. So what's the domain of the new radical function? Greater than or equal to -2. Is everybody okay with that one? Because the x values are from -2 onwards. So the domain are x is greater than or equal to -2, where x is an element of real numbers. What's the other way of writing the domain? -2 up to positive infinity. Okay, is that good? Now take a look at the range. Range of y equals to square root of f of x. What is the range of that function? The range are possible y values greater than 0. So y is greater than or equal to 0, where y is an element of real numbers. Or the other way would be 0, including 0, so square brackets, comma, positive infinity. Is that okay? So far, so good? That's just a first example. Take a look at example B. example. We don't need to know what the function is, what the linear function. We know it's a linear. We don't need to know the equation of this linear function. Okay. So what we're going to do is we're going to do the same thing. We're going to take a look at the square root of this f of x. Okay. So the very first thing that we have to do is any y values that will give us a negative will be discarded because we cannot take the square root of a negative. So this is gone. Okay. Are you convinced that this is gone? Are you okay with that one? Yeah? Okay. Well, let's pick something. Okay, let's pick something. Let's pick this point here. Okay? Maybe you're not convinced yet. What's the your values are x and f of x, that's your y, and then the square root of f of x. So if you have a negative, this point here is going to be 0, -1, right? Yeah. So 0, -1, that particular point on the linear function. Now, if you look at this one here, f of x, square root of f of x, that means we have to take the square root of -1. And that's not defined. Okay, it's not going to give us a real number solution. So this one here, square root of -1, is not defined. So it's not defined when f of x is a negative value. Are you okay? So anything below here, we're going to have a y value that are negative. So that's gone. Okay. Is that pretty clear there? Okay. So where is it going to start? Well, it's going to start right here. So it's only defined for non-negative values. So that means 0. Right? So 0. So square root of 0 is 0. Okay. Square root of 0 is 0. And I'm going to erase this part because I'm going to end up a space. I'm going to need the space here. Now we're going to pick something that's really easy to read. Okay, so this is the next one. The y is, f of x is 1. So the y is 1. What's the square root of 1? Square root of 1 is 1. Okay, and anything above that. Okay, so these two are the invariant points. That's going to give us that little bubble there. And then from there, anything above 1, when you take the square root, will result in a lower number. That's why it starts to go below. Okay. So this part here, this is the y equals to the square root of f of x. Is that okay? What's the domain? What's the domain of the square root of f of x? It's going to be from this point, which is, what point is that? Yeah, negative 1.5, anything to the left. So the domain is x less than or equal to negative 1.5, where x is an element of real numbers. Or, what's the other way? We can say from negative infinity up to negative 1.5. So these two are similar in these are saying the same thing, but one is a set notation and the other one is an interval notation. Okay, take a look at the range. What is the range of the function? Y has to be greater than or equal to 0, where y is an element of real numbers. And what's the other way of writing that? Square brackets, 0 to positive infinity. That's good. Is that okay? So that's that part. Good. What's the invariant point in here? Let's just write that down. Invariant points. Yep. Negative 1.5 comma 0, right? And then the other one is negative 3 comma 1. So invariance when f of x is 0 and f of x equals to 1. I'm going to write it down over here. Invariant points is located where the square root of f of x is equals to f of x itself. Right? F of x is the y, and then the square root of f of x. That's where the invariant points are. Okay, I'm going to pause right here. I'm going to give you some time to try this on your own first. And then the second half of our class, we will talk about the other one. Okay, I'm just going to flip it for a second here. We're going to take a look at a different graph, which is a parabola graphing a square root of the parabola. Okay, so I'll give you some time to actually practice